Good morning. My name is Natalie Sutton, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association Greater Indiana. And I want to thank all of you for taking time from all of your many priorities to be with us this morning. We're going to start with some notes regarding our virtual meeting. Today's meeting is being recorded so that we can share it with community leaders who were interested but not able to attend. With the exceptions of our speakers, we are going to mute lines, but you're encouraged to use the chat feature for any questions or comments during the meeting. We would like you to be as interactive as possible. And because we do have a packed agenda with compelling speakers, we likely won't have time to address those questions or comments during the meeting, but our team will compile these and will respond to you following the event. And finally, we're going to be using the polling feature in Zoom, so be ready to participate in that. Now, several years ago, in collaboration with leaders who were engaged in our work, we identified the need to convene the highest level leaders in the Central Indiana community to raise awareness of the impact of Alzheimer's and dementia on our community, businesses, and families. This gathering is now in its fourth year, and as a result of connections made here, we have significantly grown corporate leadership and volunteerism in support of the Alzheimer's Association mission. Before I introduce today's host, I do want to recognize our previous host of the Community Leaders Gathering. In 2019, Dave Ricks and Mike Harrington of Eli Lilly and Company started this activity with us. In 2020, Mark Miles and Tony George with Penske Entertainment Corp and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway hosted this event. And last year in 2021, Ursal Özdemir of Keystone Group and Indy 11. Ursal is now serving as the executive event chair for this year's Walk to End Alzheimer's. Following last year's gathering, we connected with today's host. His understanding of these issues, deep sense of responsibility, leadership, and commitment to addressing the Alzheimer's and dementia crisis were evident. Our organizations have long partnered in Alzheimer's research and community events, and today you will hear more about Indiana's incredible leadership in dementia research, providing quality care, and supporting those affected. It is my honor to introduce today's host, Dennis Murphy, the President and CEO of Indiana University Health.
Thanks so much, Natalie, and really appreciate that kind introduction and also the history of this event. Today, we've gathered here, I think, as leaders in our community because each of us plays a really important role in addressing Alzheimer's disease for our businesses, our employees, and our communities. And maybe all of us feel this every day, that as leaders, we have unique responsibilities in those domains to actively engage. And I think today's a great way to actively engage in managing the challenges around Alzheimer's and the dementia crisis. I had the good fortune last year of being in the audience. I was invited by Ursal. Ursal and I have a lot in common that people may not think about. We're pretty different people, but our past is very similar in terms of how we grew up. And I was really motivated by Ursal's story and how Alzheimer's has impacted his family. And so when I was asked, was really motivated to participate. And I thought a really interesting way that last year's meeting started off was with a poll. So I think we're going to do the same thing this year. And before I share my personal story, we'd like just to do a quick survey online here that everybody can do to see the impact of Alzheimer's for you. Right. So, Julie, will we see the results of the poll now?
Yes, I'll end it and share the results.
Perfect. So pretty amazing that over half the people on the call have lost someone to Alzheimer's. And actually, I think the statistics of 18% actually are a little higher than what I think we see in the US broadly. So we've got about 11% of the US population is taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's. So let me tell you a little bit about my connection to Alzheimer's. There's a photo that you'll see here, and maybe one of my favorite photos is the one on the right. What you'll see is three Irish sisters. The one on the left is my mother, and the other two are her sisters. My aunts both passed away from Alzheimer's, and this picture was taken every summer. I would go back to Ireland to stay at my grandparents' house, and my cousins from England and all over Europe would come back. And I have a series of probably 20 pictures across the time of my mom and her sisters and brothers all sitting on a couch taking a family picture. But I think what's interesting is my mom's 85 and lives in fear of getting Alzheimer's like her sisters did. And so her way of dealing with that is she's actually a respite caregiver for families impacted by Alzheimer's, and she provides care so that the caregivers can get a break, and really feels like that's part of her way of giving back, and something that brings her joy every day. But I also know it's part of her connection back to her sisters. And so maybe as an employer, I think about that regularly, because here at IU Health, we have 38,000 employees. And if you just think about the statistics, that means we have over 1,000 people today in our workforce who are caring for somebody with Alzheimer's. And it just reflects on the idea that Alzheimer's is really not a disease of a patient. Alzheimer's is a disease that impacts families, and it impacts all of our employees in all of our businesses, and it impacts our communities. And so I think those stresses and burdens are really immense and shouldn't go unnoticed. I think the last 2 years have taught us the impact that any disease can have on us as individuals and as communities. This one persists. This is something that will not come in waves like COVID. It is a constant that we are dealing with. I think beyond my personal experience and my own workforce experience, I think I'm really grateful to be a part of such a wonderful healthcare organization trying to deal with really vexing issues that impact the health of our state. And the biggest impact or variable impacting Alzheimer's is age. And today we are at the peak of baby boomers turning 65. We have over 10,000 people a day in the US turning 65. And so that's not going to cease. And those people will continue to age. Ideally, they will age to their 70s, their 80s. And Indiana is actually at the upper end of that. We have an older than average population. So I think the inevitability of being impacted by this Alzheimer's crisis is here. I think what's really unique for me is I have my two aunts were in Ireland and England, and they had very different safety nets for those families and those patients, that they were paid to stay at home to care for loved ones as part of that social safety net. Here in the US, organizations like this are our safety net. They are the way that we get care to these families who need help. I also think it requires all of us as community leaders to engage in a way that is different than in other countries. I think today you'll hear from a really remarkable leaders here at IU Health. But I think this is an important strategic area for us as IU Health. We really look at this in three ways: how we are amassing the talent to do advanced research, think about advanced treatments and therapeutics to improve the lives of these patients and their families. And I'm extraordinarily grateful that we have three remarkable leaders in our Neurosciences Institute, one of which will speak today. I saw Dr. Lamb's name on the list here as I was scrolling through who's attending, and Dr. Timmons are also really engaged in this. I think the other is really to create a better knowledge set around Alzheimer's. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and outdated notions around can you prevent and understand and detect Alzheimer's. That today we do have technology that will actually allow us to diagnose and detect Alzheimer's disease and do that very accurately. And so it's really important for families to know where they are on this Alzheimer's journey. And we can do that better than ever before. I think another really important part of this is understanding the social and environmental determinants that contribute to Alzheimer's and dementia. And that data and that information is growing. And I think this will be really important as we think about better ways to engage diverse communities and to develop sensitive responses to different populations, because we know that older Black and Hispanic populations are actually disproportionately more likely to have Alzheimer's and other dementias, but they're also more likely to have misdiagnosis. And so we know we need to have different approaches for different patient populations. And finally, I really think a key to these really complicated problems are partnerships. And the Alzheimer's Association is an incredible partner as we think about how to connect caregivers and individuals who are living with Alzheimer's to resources that are available to them. I always think it's amazing that so many people don't know how to get help. And I think the Alzheimer's Foundation is such an incredible resource to help them find the help that they need, but also to think about how you can participate and just be aware that if you're not impacted by this directly, how you can help others in need. So I'm really excited that we have so many people here today. Again, it's a real testament, I think, to people's desire to help and do something. I'd really love to introduce somebody I truly admire, I think of as a superstar in our midst here at IU Health, but also an incredibly kind and nice person, somebody I always enjoy getting to talk to. So I'm proud to introduce Dr. Laurie Gutmann, who is our co-chair of our Neuroscience Institute at IU Health. And Dr. Gutmann and her team are working incredibly hard to create what will be one of the premier neurosciences institutes in the country here in downtown Indianapolis. So welcome, Laurie.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Well, I'm here not only as a researcher and leader with IU Health, but also as a granddaughter and daughter who witnessed the toll of Alzheimer's disease on my family. The photos you see are my grandparents who escaped Germany with their two sons, and then my father and uncle, a photo of them with their wives. And then a couple of photos of me with my father, who also happens to be a neurologist. And when my grandfather developed Alzheimer's disease, it was incredibly traumatic to watch the disease turn this very kind and gentle person into someone we could no longer recognize. Years later, my grandmother also developed Alzheimer's disease, and my uncle, who'd been my grandfather's caregiver, called my father to say, I can't do this again. So my grandmother came to live in our town in West Virginia. I was in medical school at the time, and I saw her almost daily and witnessed her 10-year decline. My father and uncle both are doctors and Alzheimer's caregivers to their parents, and they spend a lot of time checking in with each other to look for signs of the disease in each other as they worry about their susceptibility to it. And like many, they managed their fear of developing Alzheimer's, aware of how devastating the disease was for our whole family. Unfortunately, this story is true in other homes, as we saw from the poll, and in other ways. As Hoosiers age and neurological issues increase, virtually everyone will be affected in one way or another. I'm new to Indiana and to IU Health. As I was considering the opportunity to join this team, my jaw dropped as I learned more and more about the incredible work happening here in Indiana in the Alzheimer's and dementia space. IU Health has a really long track record of helping families and advancing research. Next slide. So this slide, courtesy of Dr. Bruce Lamb, focuses on the basic science and drug development work that has gone on here. You can see we've been in this business for a long time trying to find a cure. The Neuroscience Institute of IU Health builds on that incredible foundation in several ways. We've assembled a team of leading scientists, researchers, imaging specialists, clinical workers, geneticists, early onset investigators, and others to collaborate on bench to bedside connections. We've deepened our efforts in neurology through animal models, disease markers, therapeutic treatments, behavioral health, and others. On the next slide, you can see our clinical research program began 3 decades ago and has grown from a staff of 4 to over 60 staff in the last 15 years, offering multiple clinical research studies to Hoosiers. Technology advancements have accelerated groundbreaking research that allow us to make advances in early diagnosis and intervention. On this next slide, you can see some highlights of key projects that include younger onset, the LEADS program, looking at people who have younger onset Alzheimer's disease. We're a national cell repository for Alzheimer's disease through our genetics program. Biomarkers are a highlight of what we do. The Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Center, behavioral health, lots of other areas, developing models for animal models for the disease, as well as multiple different approaches. So our team has garnered national and international support. We have awards and acclaim, including on the next slide, you can see our National Institutes of Health, or otherwise known as NIH funding, specific to Alzheimer's disease, growing exponentially over the last 5 years. You can see that in the green bar in the middle for each year. Indiana University ranks number 4 in the nation in Alzheimer's and dementia research funding from the National Institutes of Aging, which is the major funding branch for dementia research for the NIH, with a total of $68 million in research funding active in our state. My colleague, Dr. Liana Apostolova, on the next slide, you can see a picture of her with one of the study patients in the early Alzheimer's study. She was recently appointed the editor-in-chief of Alzheimer's and Dementia Diagnosis Assessment and Disease Monitoring Journal, a major journal for Alzheimer's disease, and also named to the FDA's Peripheral and Central Nervous System Drugs Advisory Committee. A major honor, and really just one of the researchers, along with people like Dr. Marty Farlow, Bruce Lamb, Jeff Dage, Malaz Bustani, all involved at national levels to help advance the understanding and treatments for Alzheimer's. Our efforts will positively impact everyone in Indiana as treatments and protocols spread to all of IU Health's facilities, as well as other hospitals across the state. Through an international collaboration, Dr. Jared Brosh and Dustin Hammers are working with Dr. Malaz Bustani and IU Health primary care team to institute early screening for mild cognitive impairment. As noted in a recent Alzheimer's Association newsletter, identifying which individuals live with mild cognitive impairment are more likely to develop dementia. This is a major goal of current research, potentially enabling early disease intervention and treatment. And we are part of this. Major approach to trying to diagnose people before the disease has progressed. So our goal is for all Hoosiers with a loved one impacted by Alzheimer's to get help and support in their own communities, whether it's a small town or a large city. This goal is shared by the Alzheimer's Association. They are a very valuable partner in this work with us here at IUH. This is not a time for Hoosier humility. Our community needs to know of this important work happening right here in Indiana to change the course of the disease. And people also need to know about the resources available on this journey, especially those offered by the Alzheimer's Association, as Dennis already discussed. As community leaders, I hope you will leverage your voice to spread the word and grow our impact. Now, I'm honored to introduce our next speaker, whose story illustrates what many of us and many in your network may experience. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Toni Jean Dickerson. Dr. Toni, thank you for being with us today.
Good morning, thank you. I am Dr. Toni Jean Dickerson, and I am a surviving caretaker of an Alzheimer's patient. I lost my little mama March 1st, 2019. So this talk might be pretty raw for me. I can usually get through without tears, but forgive me in advance if I don't. You will see in some of these pictures the various stages that Mama went through on her Alzheimer's journey. In the picture with the young boy, her great-grandson, Kyron, it shows her at the most advanced stage, but that was a great day because we were headed to the state fair and she was quite lucid that day and having fun. And we all cheered when she remembered how to tear into an elephant ear on that day. My beautiful mama, Mrs. Linda Edwards Lee, was born and raised in a little town called Elkton, Kentucky, in either July or August of 1934. And that story will have to be told another day. But she was orphaned early at the age of 14, and yet she willed herself to become one of the best mamas that ever held the job. She became my buddy. She supported everything that I did. She traveled with myself and my students for decades as a chaperone. And she moved in with me actually in 2005 after deciding that she didn't want to stay in Indianapolis anymore because my dad had died. For the next 5 years, I got the best of her. She was the best cook and she loved doing it. She made my bed and she ironed my clothes daily. She allowed me to finally get a dog and we got 2, Biscuit and Butter. She sewed and she traveled with my friends and I, and life was very good. And then things began to change. Unfortunately, my personal journey and connection to Alzheimer's and my mother's journey may have begun as far back as 2004. I took my mother to a dentist and her systolic blood pressure number was over 200. My mother had gone years with unchecked high blood pressure. And by the time her kidneys were damaged and she was in need of dialysis, the timing coincided with early detection of dementia. Over the course of the next 9 years, the decline of my mother's health impacted every aspect of our lives. Every thought, every action, every personal and professional decision was made around Mama's diagnosis of Alzheimer's. I took a $30,000 cut in pay so that I could take a job that gave me fewer responsibilities. I had to get my new employer to understand that I could not report to school before 8 a.m. and I had to leave by 4:15 p.m. daily. There were many days that I still find myself apologizing to the ladies at Mama's Adult Daycare because I was stopped by a student or a parent on my way out of school, and I just had to handle the situation. While it might have appeared that I had taken on fewer responsibilities at the workplace, as the disease progressed, my responsibilities at home revved up. Dealing with Alzheimer's seemed to change almost everything about me. The cracks in my cape were starting to show. You know, the one that we put on when we agree to take on the responsibility of being a caretaker. I actually told myself that I was born to do this. I had been a strong-willed kid. I mean, I was the 7th of 8 and I never took on the baby of the family persona. So professionally, I held positions of authority and leadership for most of my career. So of course I could deal with Alzheimer's. But when I started to realize that I seemed to be in a constant state of bereavement, it's when I started to notice that being a caretaker was more than I could truly handle. Just below the surface, I was hurting, but refused to let other people see it. And so it was a real surprise in 2017 to myself and my family that after 35 years of living in Missouri, I decided to move back home to Indianapolis. Mama and I were able to receive several more years of love and support from our extended family before she peacefully slipped away on March 1st, 2019. Over the years, I learned many coping mechanisms, and unfortunately, there were plenty of friends and family who could share in those sentiments. I too lost, or I too am living with someone with Alzheimer's, seems to be an all too common refrain. I had met several people associated with the Alzheimer's Association located just outside of the Kansas City, Missouri area in Prairie View, Kansas. But I must admit that I didn't take full advantage of services at that time. You know, when you're in the middle of the what, it may seem counterintuitive, but you don't always reach out for support, even when someone is extending a helping hand. However, I sense that there's something a lot different going on here in Indiana. The folks here in Indiana reach out strategically and they make things happen. From a query about a quilt my guild created for the Alzheimer's Association, leadership here in Indiana jumped on an opportunity to strengthen connections to our guild and thus to the community. From an opportunity, the lights in our room turn out. Sorry about that. From an opportunity to speak to potential TLD participants, Indiana leadership tapped into how our mutual interest in telling my mama's story could be linked to research. Because of their passion for truly fulfilling the mission of the association, I have now started insisting that my friends and colleagues reach out to the association for help and resources. Instead of just raising money for the association, I have truly made a commitment to finding my community the professional support that they didn't even realize they needed. Thank you.
Dr. Tony, you are such an inspiration to all of us, and I've heard you speak before, so I really should have planned better than to follow you in today's agenda. I also want to thank Dennis and Dr. Gutmann for sharing your stories and for your leadership in the fight against Alzheimer's and other dementia. Like many of you here today, my family has been personally impacted by dementia. My grandpa Don passed away with vascular dementia 5 years ago, just a couple of months before I began exploring this opportunity to join the Alzheimer's Association team. My grandpa suffered from congestive heart failure, but it was his dementia that posed the greatest challenge for my grandma Martha, who I still talk to most Sundays, my dad and his siblings, and our entire family. Now, as you are learning today, my family is not alone. Just yesterday, the Alzheimer's Association released our annual Alzheimer's disease facts and figures report, which compiles all of the latest data on the disease. Right now, 6 million Americans, including 110,000 Hoosiers, are living with Alzheimer's disease. In Indiana, 216,000 Hoosiers provide 276 million hours of unpaid care for someone with dementia at a value of more than $4.3 billion. Unfortunately, deaths from Alzheimer's disease continue to rise, while other disease-related causes of death decrease. And despite these overwhelming statistics, we are optimistic about the future, and we, along with many partners here today, are committed to action that will change the trajectory and reduce the burden of dementia on our communities, our families, and our businesses. The Alzheimer's Association is the leading voluntary health association dedicated to Alzheimer's care, support, research, and advocacy. We work to advance our mission through 6 pillars of our strategic plan. Today, I'm going to highlight just 3 of those 6 pillars. I promise I could go on at length about each and every one. First, accelerating research. As you heard from Dr. Gutmann, Indiana plays a vital role in advancing global research. The Alzheimer's Association supports research here in Indiana and around the world. We are the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research with $300 million in active funding. This includes 11 active research awards in Indiana, totaling about $2.5 million. Over the years, the Alzheimer's Association has funded more than $6 million in research to Indiana institutions and scientists. You've heard about the importance of federal research funding. While our dollars might be fewer than the federal government, there are some important factors that set Alzheimer's Association research funding apart. We take risks. We fund the best research around the globe, not just here in the United States. We invest in early career investigators so that we can attract the best and brightest talent to the Alzheimer's and dementia space. And we seed novel ideas that can later be scaled with federal funding. Now, Dennis mentioned the advancing technology and advancements in research and science, including some key milestones driven by the Alzheimer's Association, have led to FDA approval in June of 2021 for the first Alzheimer's treatment that may slow the progression and affect the underlying biology of the disease. This is an incredible moment, but it's not a cure, and we hope this will be the first of many new treatments. In fact, there are many new treatments on the horizon, including a treatment by Indianapolis-based Eli Lilly and Company that has been granted breakthrough therapy designation by the FDA, likely will be submitted and reviewed later this year. Currently, there are 104 disease-modifying treatments for Alzheimer's disease being evaluated in clinical trials and at various stages of regulatory approval. Beyond the Alzheimer's Association funding of research, we also work to strengthen information sharing, discussion, and advancement of the science through our role as a convener. The Alzheimer's Association International Conference is the world's largest forum for the dementia research community. And this slide shows a number of key projects where you will find the Alzheimer's Association's scientific leadership at work. Next, advancing public policy. We pursue advocacy and public policy change at both the federal and state levels. We have mobilized volunteer advocates representing every congressional district to achieve transformational bipartisan results. One example of that is increasing research funding. In 2011, researchers told us that this disease demanded more than the $450 million in federal research funding at the time. I'm really proud to share that just Monday, the president signed into law another increase in Alzheimer's and dementia research funding at the NIH, bringing the total to $3.5 billion per year. Yes, I said $3.5 billion, which is up from $450 million in 2011. These dollars have directly led to the growth in research here in Indiana and to the projects you heard about from Dr. Gutmann. And our advocacy doesn't stop with increasing research funding. With new treatments on the horizon, we are increasing our focus on making sure that there is access to those treatments for all who could benefit from them. We've also recently increased our focus and gained momentum on state level policy. In 2021, we passed legislation that requires FSSA's Division of Aging to develop a dementia strategic plan for the state of Indiana. And just days ago, Governor Holcomb signed Senate Enrolled Act 353 to require dementia training for home health aides. This is aimed at empowering the direct care workforce with proper training to help reduce burnout and improve the quality of care. Aging Hoosiers tell us they want a choice in the care they receive, and they prefer for that care to be delivered at home or in the community. Indiana is at a pivotal point in a transition to rebalance long-term services and supports. And we at the Alzheimer's Association Greater Indiana are collaborating with our state agencies to ensure policies, services, and solutions support these goals of Hoosiers. Finally, I want to talk about our goal of enhancing care and support. Dennis has said that people don't have Alzheimer's, families have Alzheimer's. And we want to ensure that no family walks this journey alone without the resources and support that they need. So we do this in two ways: best-in-class services provided directly by the Alzheimer's Association, but also collaborating with healthcare partners. The Greater Indiana chapter provides care and support to about 6,000 Hoosiers each year through a 24/7 helpline, personalized care consultation, education programs, and support groups. We play a unique role in providing accessible, free support to those who are impacted. I want to talk specifically about the helpline. The Alzheimer's Association helpline has been staffed 24/7 since May 2001 with dementia specialists and licensed care consultants. Anyone who's been impacted by dementia knows that it does not neatly present itself during business hours. And that's why we are only a phone call away for questions big and small, 24 hours a day. Most caregivers tell us that they only wish they had called sooner to benefit from the knowledgeable, compassionate voice on the other end of the line and the resulting action plan to support their loved one. Here in the community, we work alongside volunteers and community partners to offer online, virtual, and in-person education, caregiving tools, and support groups for those living with the disease, their families and caregivers, and healthcare professionals. While we are really confident in the services we provide, one of the most difficult things we hear is when someone learns of our services too late. Our biggest focus is to continue extending our reach so that all families impacted benefit from support. We know that our organization alone can't meet the growing demand of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. That's why we're invested in partnering with healthcare systems, payers, and providers, including those here in our community like IU Health and others, to facilitate system-level changes that will improve care for all who are impacted. We are so proud of this mission, but we are also proud of the way our Central Indiana community engages to advance the work. There truly is a place for everyone to get involved. Companies and individuals provide valuable support that furthers our impact in Indiana through fundraising events like the Walk to End Alzheimer's, the Longest Day, our local Chocolate Sunday Brunch Gala. You or your company could sponsor an event, form a team, share resources for your employees and clients, volunteer on our board or executive leadership team, host an event, make an introduction, or make a personal donation. And we hope to explore some of these opportunities with each of you. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to one of the very supporters who makes our work possible here in Indiana, Chris Waters, founder and CEO of Luna Language Services.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you to everybody for their stories, and I can attest that this is never a super easy thing to talk about, and everybody that's in this Zoom call. I think everybody's here because they are impacted. And I was really found the poll interesting that Dennis put out at the beginning, because I actually checked the first two boxes. Not one just applies. And my family is my why. And because the tentacles of Alzheimer's have impacted several parts of my family. And I just kind of want to talk about the people that you see in front of you. In the middle is my mom and my daughter, Luna, who's now 12. And the picture next to her is my mother and my father. My mother was a teacher at Sycamore School here in Indianapolis, taught gifted kids. And I don't know if anybody's kids have been through Sycamore School, but she's largely in part for setting up History Day there back when the school was founded. And like all of us have seen, you never know when somebody quite starts to show signs of it. There's little signs along the way. I think a lot of people chalk it up to senior moments. But I remember my mom's last year of teaching. She kind of had a harder time grading papers. Had a harder time getting through her day, and one thing led to another, and my mom passed away at the age of 76 from Alzheimer's. So kind of was robbed of her life as a grandmother, robbed of her life as a retiree. All the plans my dad and her made, they were smart about saving for retirement and had this whole vision of their life. It was changed. So that's kind of my story as it is impacted of losing somebody. Currently, my father-in-law, who is an immigrant from Greece, came over here when he was 16 years old to high school in Kansas City, Missouri, not speaking any English, and made his way through and went to Berkeley. Graduated in computer science there, lived his life as a musician. He was a Greek musician, played bouzouki, played piano, played guitar, played harmonica, beautiful singing voice. He started exhibiting signs of dementia a few years ago, and he was coming to visit us from California, and I went to pick him up at the airport, and that was the moment when I saw him get off the plane that it hit that, he's not going back. So my father-in-law currently lives with us out at our house. And then two other gentlemen in those pictures. There was a picture that was up of kind of a scary looking family from the 1970s. And that was my Uncle Charles, who passed away this winter from Alzheimer's. And kind of the tragic story behind that, as we've all seen, is, he spent the last 2 years of his life isolated because of COVID. In Amarillo, Texas, in a facility, and we all saw stories of that. The only thing I'm thankful of is for my mother is that she didn't have to go through that. And so those of us that lost people before the pandemic, I know Dr. Dickerson did. Maybe the small sliver of silver lining is that you didn't have to go through that process with your loved ones. And really, the reason I'm involved with the Alzheimer's Association and the reason I'm passionate about it is all of those things. And I should say the last gentleman, there was a picture of me playing golf with two people, is my wife's Uncle Dave, who's in the early stages of Alzheimer's. He's a Scotsman, an avid golfer, avid outdoorsman, has climbed mountains, and is starting to go through the beginning of that. And Jill, his wife, is there with him, and she is his caretaker. So my family is the reason why, and it's not just because of the people I've lost, and the reason I included a picture of my daughter Luna there is really the reason I think we're all involved with this. And the reason Dr. Gutmann, and I saw Dr. Lamb was on the call, and Dennis is in IU Health, and Dennis, and the reason everybody's so advocate or such strong advocates about solving the riddle of Alzheimer's is not really for the people we've lost, it's for the people that are coming behind us. It's for my daughter, it's for my son, it's for me from a selfish perspective. You know, all of us who have lost family members, in the back of our minds, you know, Dennis's mother and what she goes through and what I go through is in the back of my mind, well, when's it going to happen to me? How's it going to happen to me? And so, and consequently, how's it going to happen to my children? How's, you know, what are they going to do? Is my daughter going to be taking care of me someday, like we took take care of my father-in-law? So I think one of the big reasons is for that generation, for the next generation. And what can we do to make their lives better and to not have to go through what we've all gone through on a personal level, on a professional level. So that kind of got me motivated to get involved with the organization. I actually played in a couple golf tournaments. I guess they kind of knew my Achilles heel of how to get me in the door. So, and I kind of got involved with the association like that. And Natalie kind of touched on on everything that the association does well. We've got great leadership from Natalie, from Anne, Christy, Julie. I see them on the call. We have an unbelievable board. I saw Phyllis is on here, and Dr. Lamb obviously is a star amongst himself among everybody here. You know, everybody knows who he is and the great work he's doing, and he's just a blessing to have on our team. And Natalie kind of talked about the 24/7 helpline. There's resources nationwide. The problem is that I don't know if anybody's Hamilton fans here, but I'm a huge fan of Hamilton, and there's a line in the song, it's Quiet Uptown, you know, after their son dies, and there's a line about how when grief is so strong, it's just easier to swim down. It's easier to just get lost and to swim down in it. So all of us that support caretakers, what we need to do is to provide those resources for them, to give them the push they need, because when you're going through it, you just can't do it. You can't get through them. You just struggle to get through the hour, to get through the day. And so for those of us that have friends, that have family that are going through this, we need to push them into getting involved with the association and to use the resources that are there. As employers and as leaders in our businesses and in our health centers and in our government positions, we need to make these resources accessible to our staff. Because you heard Dr. Dickerson's employment story about how she had to take cutbacks, how she had to like make sacrifices in her job and in her career to be able to support her family. And so this is something that's going to be affecting all of us from a workplace morale standpoint, from a financial standpoint, and we have to come and figure out how to be able to work with our staff and with our colleagues to be able to help them support. Otherwise, in today's job market, from a professional standpoint, you're going to be facing like a crisis from just that perspective. So using the free resources of the Alzheimer's Association is kind of like a win-win from just doing the right thing morally and from doing the right thing from running your organization correctly. And like I said, Natalie and her team have more information and can better articulate what they can do than I can, as Natalie said earlier. The last thing I kind of want to touch on, which is kind of a passion of ours here at Luna, is diversity and what we're doing to reach the vulnerable communities in central Indiana and throughout our state. As we saw during the pandemic, we're only really as strong as our weakest link. And part of the problem was our inability to reach communities in our city effectively about the efficacy of vaccines, about masking, about all sorts of precautions, which kind of hindered our ability to effectively fight something that was as in our face as COVID. So Alzheimer's is similar to that in a lot of respects, is that we do not do a very good and effective job of reaching communities of color. We do not do a good job of reaching the deaf and hard of hearing community. And we don't do a good job of reaching and providing the resources to our non-English speaking communities here in Central Indiana. So part of our challenge as an organization is to do that. And I encourage all of you to figure out ways to access those communities, to provide resources to those communities that are inside of all of your organizations, to help them deal with this disease. We've seen the statistics of how the disease affects communities of color in a more dramatic way than they do other communities. So we need to figure out how to access and to be able to provide resources to those groups as well. So that's kind of my story and my spiel on it. I want to kick it back to Dennis to wrap this up. Again, thank you everybody for being here today and for your interest in the Alzheimer's Association. And Dennis, back to you.
Thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate it. And want to say thank you to Natalie, Chris, Doctors Dickerson and Gutmann, just for sharing your stories. I always think it's hard to be vulnerable, but it's important to be vulnerable so that people understand where you're coming from. I hope for all of you who are on the call today that you heard something that motivates you, because that's really part of why we do this. I think Alzheimer's is a really unique disease and issue because I think there is so much fear and there is so much to be done to care for these patients. But I also think there is so much hope and there is so much help out there, but that many people don't know that yet. And really that's part of what we wanted to accomplish today, is to help people know about that hope and that help, and then to ask all of you to help us change that so that more people know that. I have a simple philosophy, maybe in my own leadership at IU Health, which is really to recruit great leaders and get great leaders to work as parts of great teams, and then ask them to accomplish great goals and to set expectations really high. And I think of all of you that we asked to be a part of this call as great leaders in our community, and really asking you to be a part of this team that's trying to do something great, which is really to help fight this disease. And at least really importantly, I think for me, to help the families who are impacted by this as well, who need our help. Because I do think together as a great team, you can create a more hopeful future for those families and those patients than they have today. There would be no call like this without a call to action. And I think you heard Natalie lay out at least 10 different ways people can interact with the Alzheimer's Foundation. Some of it's just as simple as reading the reports that come out from the foundation and understanding this disease's impact and talking about it with others. And there are lots of other direct ways to get more engaged. And my hope is that all of you would be receptive to an outreach from the foundation and the association just to learn more about ways to get engaged. I'd love to see all of you on the walk. I'm looking out my window today. It's a beautiful spring-like day. I'm hoping it is real spring and not the fake spring we had a week ago. But to do what you can to help because I do think there is hope with this disease. So I really just want to say thank you to all of you. I know your time is precious, and to give an hour to learn and to understand this disease a little better, to understand the Alzheimer's Association better, and just to be aware. I'm very grateful. So I just want to say thank you and really appreciate your engagement today. And I think, Natalie, that is it, right? I want to make sure I'm not